The Bible is arguably the most enigmatic book of all time. Its depth and richness of narrative, songs, poetry, law, prophecy, and eschatology is unrivaled in its class. This text confounded many for centuries. Attributed to the divine inspiration of the Most High Yah, only a select few were privileged to be able to unravel the mysteries that lie beneath. Today, there are tons of academic gatekeepers who have been able to unlock this coded script using a variety of techniques mostly unknown to laymen. However, today this is no longer the case. Thankfully, Divine Prospect has spent 15 years playing the spook who sat by the door to gather intel on how to best approach the text and get the most objective understanding possible. He is making these techniques available to the general public in the upcoming KHM Holistic Research Paradigm for Bible Study classes. For the first time, be able to read the text the way it was intended by the author to his immediate audience. Once you've been able to successfully decipher the scripture, you will then learn how to map it to modern times and yield a harvest of actual results. Sign up today by going to www.patreon.com/Divine Prospect and join the $50 tier to reserve your spot. Seats are extremely limited, so take advantage of this opportunity before it's too late. Peace and shalom. If you can hear me, hit 1 if you can hear me. Mic check. 1 2 1 2 1 2. All right. I don't know why my AirPods didn't switch over automatically. It was supposed to, so I apologize for that. Let me know if y'all can hear me. I did order another mic. I should have pulled the one that's over there, but I kept it with that setup. But I already ordered another mic to go specifically with this, so I don't have the issue no more relying on these AirPods anymore. But nevertheless, we're here. We're back in the building. It's your brother Divine Prospect, Kingdom Harbinger Ministries. We are here for another Freestyle Friday, but this one was actually set aside for an actual interesting debate for y'all on today. We've been talking about this YHWH versus ENKI discussion for some time. There was some Nuwabian brothers that we had some dialogues with. You can go back on the channel, check out our Clubhouse sessions. We had several dialogues with them. I had dialogues with Nuwabian brothers over 10, 12, 13 years ago, all the way up to today in regards to this subject matter. As you'll know, GOCC also holds that position. So I've called GOCC out. I've had several conversations with individuals in GOCC. I don't want to say their names, the elders and their names and so forth. But we've had conversations about this. So this is nothing new to me. As y'all know, I've been studying the ancient Near East for some time. And that is what my degree is in, which is the Hebrew Bible against its ancient Near Eastern background and all these societies that I joined, and specifically to orient the text back against its ancient Eastern background and for us to really understand the cultural history, historical and linguistic background of the text. So that means that incorporates anything from Kemet all the way to what we call Mesopotamia, and everything in between, right? So we have to really understand this because not one culture was an isolate, none was in a vacuum, and they all interacted with one another, right? So this is, you have the fingerprint proof of loan words, of cultural wares and so forth that's been shared across cultures, trade routes that required pick up items from various cities of different cultures, treaties that we've seen, et cetera, right? But on today, this special discussion, I have a very astute specialist in this field, this brother named Amaru Dey Hill. And he will be joining us. He did respond to a post that I made on Facebook in regards to the subject matter and wants to give us his perspective in regards to that. He also has a book that's out in regards to this that I've read thoroughly and that I also have in case he wants to reference it on screen. And we're going to try, if we have enough time, to kind of take some questions from the audience if we have a moment to do so. But we got to kind of see how this goes. So this is my first time meeting the brother per se. We've been Facebook friends for some time, it seems. But I'm going to bring him on camera, let him introduce himself, and we're going to get this conversation started. We got about an hour and 20 minutes to dialogue, and we'll see where things go. All right. So the camera's here, but I have to look here as well because this is the screen with the chat and the presentation, everything that will be on here. All right. All right, so without further ado, let me just go over a couple of housekeeping items and call out who's already in the chat with us and see where we go from here, all right? First and foremost, as you saw in the video that came on right before the live stream came on, y'all need to get in class, sign up for the Patreon, www.patreon.com/divine prospect. All right, you want to sign up for the $50 tier. You want to join so you can enroll in our KHM Holistic Research Paradigm for Bible Studies classes. There's the current course that we have going on right now. Again, we're going back into the book of Genesis and looking at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, or Bereshit, chapter 1, verse 1. And we are currently past the grammatical lexical analysis. We are now dealing with the contextual analysis. And we're trying to see how much more insight and information can be derived from the rest of the chapter of Genesis 1 in its immediate context in order for us to delineate what's going on in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. All right. So I did pre-record that. I will release that this Tuesday, the next class or the next part of the class. So y'all can see what it's about. And then we have a third part. And then we're going to close off that class, and then we're going to wait and get into our next class, which is going to be the third part, which is going to be our low intertextual analysis. All right. So get in class. It's the first one. Get in class. www.patreon.com/divine prospect. Sign up for the $50 tier and get in class. All right. Also, the YHWH versus ENKI comic will be coming soon. That will be available for $20 tiers on our Patreon. So sign up for the $20 tier. You get access to the YHWH versus ENKI comic strip that's coming up soon. You'll definitely enjoy it. I kind of truncated it. You know, I have a preview that's out there, but I truncated it to about 20 slides. But it's a whole narrative, it's a whole storyline, right? Again, it's historical fiction, and we put it together to kind of help to engage people in the subject matter and make it come a little bit more alive. You know what I'm saying? Kind of pique your imagination as it goes. So that we can get further into the study and you can kind of understand the subject matter that's going to be discussed shortly. All right. Also, just so you know, this debate is going to be available on YouTube, so anybody can watch it, right? So we want to make sure that it's free and that it's available. The only thing we ask is that you give donations while we're here. And the reason for that is because we do have a giveaway. I got it all the way back here. Let me go grab it. All right. So we have the Cultural Background Study Bible, Bringing to Life the Ancient World of Scripture. All right. So I have this as a giveaway, and I want to give it away today. So let's go ahead and send those super stickers, those donations through the chat so we continue to foster these type of conversations so I can bring more guests on. We can have more debates like we used to, but we want to get, you know, different people that we can talk to and build with. I think since we've had this show since 2017, we've had about 60 guests so far, on top of everything else that we've shared on this channel. So we want to be able to keep that going. So we're not going to put this behind a paywall, but we'd ask that you just give donations so we can continue to foster these conversations and bring these guests on. And as well, we can offer giveaways like this. And as y'all know, in regards to the Bible, I always recommend everybody have this in their top 10 books as it pertains to scripture, because you'll see the comparative, cultural, and religious and linguistic associations with other sister cultures in the ancient Near East. So you can pretty much situate the context of the Bible within its ancient Eastern background, right? So again, as we go on, do your super chats as you normally do. Just give those donations so that way we can continue to foster these conversations. All right. Next, we also, just so you know, if you don't have the calendar, email us at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com. Just want to give a heads up. Day of Atonement is coming up on October 15th in the evening, as well as Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot is coming up on the evening of October 20th. All right. So I just want to give you a heads up on these items so that you're aware of it. These things are situated on the calendar. Let me see if I can show this to y'all again. I would like for y'all to get the full calendar. I mean, most of y'all have it. Some of y'all don't. But let's take a look at the calendar real quick. And again, email us at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com so that way you can get you a calendar. All right. So this is it right here. This is the month of Ethnanim, which is the 7th month of the second reckoning, menologically speaking. And it aligns with October 2025. And on it, you'll be able to see where we at currently. We just passed Feast of Trumpets or Yom Teruah. And we are heading on to Yom HaKippurim, not Yom Kippur. Yom HaKippurim or Yom Kippurim. That is actually what you see in the text. You don't see Yom Kippur in the text. We went over this and explained what that is. And we also told y'all that there's nothing that we do in regards to this particular set apart day. And we've explained it ad infinitum. But if y'all still need some more insight on that day, I'll go live that evening and I'll go into more detail, answer questions. Or you can bring somebody on or somebody come on the panel and have a conversation about it. But we will have on the evening of the 20th, we'll start our Feast of Tabernacles, all right, or Sukkot. All right, so if you don't have a calendar, email us at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com, get your calendar, and you'll be able to see what we see, all right? It's a great calendar, great images. Shout out to my brother Seth for helping me put this together for the people, and that's for the calendar. All right, so let's move that out the way. All right. And lastly, we'll be going over more details about this government shutdown, contingency plans, and so forth. I know a lot of people have been affected by this government shutdown, whether it's people that have SNAP benefits or whether there's people that's employed by the government, or if you're employed by a business that relies on government funding, et cetera. We want to go over some alternatives to kind of assist you. We want to also start a fund so that anybody who has been adversely affected by this financially, whether due SNAP or employment or whatever the case may be, if you're furloughed, you're not getting paid, or whatever the case may be, we want to be able to be the hub to provide that support to the community. So definitely let us know. Email us at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com if you're interested, or if you need any assistance, whether it is if you want to donate or help us with the fund, or whether you do need funds. We want to make sure we take care of everybody. We did the same thing during COVID. We did the same thing during several other events that occur prior to that, right? So we try to do what we can to kind of help the community during these trying times, because this is really hurting people that I know personally, and I do not want that to overflow into the rest of the community if we can do something about it together, all right? All right, so without further ado, that was our housekeeping. We're done with that. Let me go ahead and bring on our guest, the illustrious Andre Amaru. I'm saying that right, Amaru Dey Hill. All right. What's going on, brother? How you doing?
Peace, family. Listen, man. I like the way you run your platform, brother. This is good. This is good. Much respect.
Oh, anytime, my brother. Anytime. We try to be a forum where people can speak expressly, and they can speak without judgment, without hindrance, without interruption. And I want you to be heard, and I want to hear what you have to say, right? I'm actually interested in that. There's no animosity going to this, no hate going into this. You're my brother from another mother, as we say. You know, I love our people. Whatever I can do to help liberate our people, encourage our people, build our people, that's what I'm here for. I want to make sure that this is a great platform for you to voice your perspective and for people to take it in, kind of see what our positions are, and share information back and forth. It's going to be really edifying for the audience. So I do appreciate your presence for being here, brother. All right. All All right. So before I get started, brother, let me just see who's in the chat. I want to give a couple of shout outs real quick. So shout out to Jaslyn Berry, Shalom, Yosef Grin, Shalom, Yashar Yahawa, Shalom, Shakar the Young Lion, Shalom, Moray Eric Van, Shalom, T Rainbow, Shalom, Remarkable Leadership Academy in the building, Shalom, Nazarene, Essene TV, Shalom, Get Wise, Peace, GDN, Capone, Peace, Shalom, what's going on? R.P. Shalom, A. Nelson, Shalom, Peace, Gazelle, Crouch, Peace, Shalom. Let me see what else we got in here. Miss Nicole, 253, Peace, DC, Peace, Tune, Shalom, brother. What's going on? What's going on? Nilante, Shalom, Peace, Reflection and Insight, Peace and Blessings. Jay Fearson in the building. K. Chen, what's going on, brother? Damon Williamson, Shalom, Shalom. All right, anybody else, if you do want to shout out, just hit one. If I miss you, you want to shout out, just hit one. Want to make sure everybody's acknowledged that's in here for this momentous discussion that we're having right here. And knowing that when history has passed, you know that you was part of this, if anything else. All right. All right. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and read off this brother's bio. And then after I read it, I'm going to give him a moment to kind of also add on to it to introduce himself. Again, I've looked this brother over before we even had this conversation on his Facebook. Make sure like he's not crazy, bugged out or anything like that. It kind of mess up the flow of things that we got over here. And I co-sign so he good. I'm going to give you his guest bio. So Andre Amuru, am I saying that right? Amaru?
Amaru.
Amaru. All right. Andre Amaru Dey Jr. All right. So Andre Amaru Dey Jr. is a seasoned astrologer with over 25 years of experience decoding celestial systems and their real-world influence on human consciousness and civilization. His work bridges traditional astrology with Afro-Indigenous cosmology, restoring the original spiritual and astronomical knowledge systems that predate Greco-Roman interpretations. Alongside his astrological expertise, Andre has conducted extensive research in Sumerian mythology, comparative religion, and ancient cosmological texts, exploring the origins of biblical narratives and their distortion through time. His studies reveal profound correlations between Sumerian deities, biblical figures, and planetary archetypes, offering a new lens through which to view the so-called divine conflicts within Scripture. He is also the co-author of Lucifer's Revenge, written in collaboration with his father, which delves into the suppressed truths of human origins, divine rebellion, and the esoteric connections between ancient texts and modern spiritual awakening. Andre brings a fearless and thought-provoking voice to the conversation, challenging long-held dogmas and illuminating the deeper cosmic story behind religion, power, and the human soul. All right, Andre, take it away, my brother. I'm going to give you a few minutes, introduce yourself, and you got it.
All right, peace, family. I appreciate you bringing me on the platform. Peace to everybody in the chat and all the audience that's watching. Like the bio says, I'm a 25-year student and practitioner and curator of astrological systems. When we take a look at cosmology in general, I mean, just like most things that we are consuming in this world today, they've been processed through some type of European filter, right? And Europeans, for the most part, we know this. I mean, based on their own history, their own trials and tribulation, the way they filter everything is through a lens of, to say the least, parasitism. You feel what I'm saying? So even cosmology as it's curated, or let's say the most popular form of cosmology, which is Western astrology. You feel me? Which is Western astrology. As a lot of people don't know that there was an original Bible for Western astrology as well, which was, of course, plagiarized or is further fabricated based on, which we'll get into, Sumerian, or let's say Mesopotamian influence and European influence. But the bottom line is they all got it from all of the ancient Aboriginal and indigenous nations from around the world. So what I do is I take the math, right? Because the math is a universal language. That's the universal science. Take the math of it. I strip their form of divinity away from it, and I reinsert ours. I was supposed to be. You feel me? So take for instance, even when you are creating a calendar, like you are, brother. I could create you a calendar and a cosmology system for whatever your spiritual practice is. I could do that. I can do that for you. Because like I say, the math is the math. And you put your own divination on it how you see fit. You feel me? Um, that's in a nutshell as far as my cosmology capability and experience. Um, as far as the book Lucifer's Revenge, I'm gonna be honest with you, brother. This is how this book was written. This was in 2023. I was probably about 5 projects in the hole in real estate. You feel me? In other words, I lost about $500,000. I was upset by the end of the year. You know what I mean? I was upset. So my father came to me and he was like, "Man, I got a idea for a new book." He said, "I want you to add some chapters in it about Lilith." That's originally what he wanted me to do, right? Because he wanted me to do it from the mythological standpoint of Lilith and from the astrological standpoint of Lilith. And at the time, I was not in the mind. I was trying to recoup my funds. You feel me? But the Most High spoke to me, said, "No, write this book. Write this book." And so it got to a point to where all of the information started coming to me, and the drive and the will and the discernment came to me to look into the origins of uh, um, Khazarian Judaism and its connection to Mesopotamian religious structures and political structures, right? And and see me, I'm just a very objective researcher. You feel me? I'm a very objective researcher. So when I'm looking for something, I'm not researching with confirmation bias. You see what I'm saying? So I was able to just go in, read everything, just searching for the truth, just truly private investigator style. And, I just started digging up what needed to be known. And I started in Sumer, which and it started from looking into the Anunnaki and then also looking into the civilization of Sumer, which converted into Babylon, which converted into Persia, and how that influence swept westward of that nation into Europe, into Africa through Kemet, and so forth and so on. And when you start looking at it from a anthropological standpoint and a literature standpoint, you start tying things together. And so I'll land it right there, but we're gonna get into it.
All right, I'm just multitasking over here as I'm listening. Very fascinating, interesting background. And your father is the senior, right? So he's Andre Hill, correct?
Indeed. Mhm.
Okay. Just a quick question: has he had any affiliation with Dr. Malachi Z. York, aka Pops, in his
Um,
journey of enlightenment?
he knows who he is, but never met him. Never got a
Okay.
chance to meet him. Yeah, yeah. But
All
he's
right,
familiar.
got it. All right, no problem. And are you familiar with Nuwapu or no?
Oh yeah, I got a whole bunch of homeboys in the Wapi
Okay.
Nation.
All right. Just want to make sure. Just want to make sure. Okay. All right. That's good to hear. All right, brother. So thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know if you know much background about me or if you know too much about me.
I did the same thing, bro. I just did a little reconnaissance on you, man.
Oh. Yeah.
uh,
So yeah. So I pretty much came to I guess the forefront of this community when I was featured on Sonata platform. You know who Sonata is, right? Yeah. So this was back in 2014, early 2014. I was doing some work prior to that, but when I met him in person at the IHWH cookout, because that's what he was going to be. Shaka Amos was there, Brother Reggie was there, Sankofa, a bunch of other brothers from the conscious community, as well as IHWH were there. I got to actually meet them in person. Some of them I met them before because I was going to like a lot of lectures and stuff back in 2012, 2013. And I met some of them, but there I actually got to have a one-on-one conversation with them, right? So at that point, I was chopping it up with Sonetta. He was, oh, brother, man, I really like what you dropping, man. I got to get you on the show, blah, blah. We got to do a sit down, A, B, and C. So I said, all right, well, we'll see what develops, you know what I'm saying? And then over that summer, when I was visiting New York, he featured me, you know, just freestyling outside. I think one of the first videos was Sonetta was going around looking at all the black sisters that was wearing like weaves and fake hair and heavy dyes and stuff in their hair, and he was like, oh, we got to do something about this. This is the China man down the street. He's the one selling this to our sisters. So we took the whole block over. We was going in talking about, you know, the history, why our sisters are doing that, etc. So it went from there to me start sharing a bunch of lectures and insights on the channel based on things that are relevant, whether that's activism, whether that's religion, whether that's culture, whether that's history. Then I had debates on there with several people like the brother Cyrus and Seti. Me and him had some dates. Polite, when Polite was out at that time, me and him had discourses and so forth. But during that period of time, I got a THD, and my THD specifically surrounds the Hebrew Bible and the ancient Near Eastern background, and specifically doing research in that field to situate the Bible back into its ancient Near Eastern background. I've been to plenty of scholarly conferences. I'm part of over 8 societies, academic societies. So, you know, I'm very familiar with the primary sources for a lot of these texts that people reference to when they build, you know, different doctrines and perspectives and so forth. So I like talking to other people who are familiar with the ancient Near East, and as well as its associations and correlations with the Bible. So we can kind of see if we can meet somewhere in the middle ground, or if we're diametrically opposed, that's fine. But I know one thing that's been a big hot topic as of the past couple of years is the associations with Yahweh and ENKI, or YHWH and ENKI. I've been having this debate with Nuwabians for almost 12 years now. And it's been fierce, you know what I'm saying? And I have a couple of those sessions, recent sessions on this YouTube channel, and I go back and forth with them who make the same claims and so forth. So when you said the same claim and you was interested, I went and looked back and said, okay, brother got a book. And for the record, I read the entire book. Very insightful. I wanted to heavily critique it, but I was focused on chapter 8, chapter 9. And those are the 2 chapters that I was focused on, chapter 8 and chapter 9. And the other chapters, you know, I read through them, just kind of familiarized myself with them, but I focus on those 2 because I need to segment those for this session that we're having right now, because really where the topic is at. So it was well-written book. Yeah, well-written book. And again, I wanted to critique it on a, I guess, more of a historical level and archaeological level, but it was pretty sound. It was pretty sound in its references and so forth. So I was like, okay, all right, I guess I can rock with this. So now that I have you here, now we can engage in conversation. So I want to start off by allowing you to give us your proposition, right? You made an assertion on my Facebook post, and you said that YHWH is ENKI. I was like, what? So that was the proposition you made. So what I want to do is I would like for you to introduce that proposition and let us know why you hold that position. You don't have to go too in depth. This is just introducing the subject. And then from there, when we open up the conversation, if you want to reference something else or add additional information, we definitely can. This is a preliminary discussion. This is our first time meeting. We're probably going to have successive ones after this if people enjoy the conversation. But I would love for you to introduce that proposition to me, because I've heard it a million times before, but I would love to see your angle on it right now. If you want, I can keep your book up or take it down. You just let me know what you want me to do, because you know I have your book up. I don't know if you can see the screen.
I can see it. I appreciate
okay.
Family. No,
okay.
we can take it down. It's all good.
Yeah, just let me know whenever you want to bring it up. I can bring it up.
Yeah, listen, I appreciate the support, and I'm impressed with you reading that bad boy in like a couple of weeks. You feel me?
It was less than about 2 weeks. I read the whole thing cover to cover. Yep.
That's impressive, and for one, I appreciate the support, man. I wasn't expecting you to get the book and read it.
I bought it. Brother, listen, if you got material out and you're a black man, I put your hard work, blood, sweat, and tears in that, and you said, look, this is my reference. If I can buy it. Now, I got the physical book, but it's not going to get here in time. So I paid $10 and I got the digital book. I got both of them. Yeah. And hey, when we do another one of these, I'm going to put it right on the screen so you can see the actual book. Brother, I'm here to support you. You know what I'm saying? So go ahead. You got it.
I got reciprocate, brother. I got to reciprocate, man. And so we'll talk about that after the show. But like you say, we'll definitely have some successful follow-up, man. But my proposition is this: not that Yahweh is ENKI, Yahweh is Enlil. You went mute. I can't hear you. Oh, okay, no, you mute on purpose. Okay, I got you. Yahweh is Enlil. And if you get into the Anunnaki pantheon, of course, the most popular ones are Enlil, ENKI, and a little less popular, their sister Ninhursag. They're the ones primarily responsible for creation and a lot of Anunnaki events, especially the most prominent ones that give you insight into either its influence on Abrahamic religion, and I'm not just talking about us. When I say that, I mean Abrahamic religion, and we're gonna get into that as well. You feel me? But yeah. So just to keep it right there, proposition is Yahweh is Enlil. All right. When you start to get into when you start reading different Anunnaki epics, and you look at a lot of the actions of Enlil, you look at a lot of the reasons he did it. You start to draw a lot of comparison to biblical Yahweh. Start to draw a lot of comparison, and my uncle he showed me a video, Shaka Amos, that made maybe a good point. That even Allah, even the God Allah is mentioned in the Anunnaki one of the Anunnaki storylines in particular. So saying all that to say this, when we think about it, and I want to ask you this question, but we making the proposition first. So we'll get into it in a few. It's particularly a question about Abraham. You feel me? But I'll land it right there unless you need me to say more. Okay.
I think that was a good introduction. It did make me pivot a bit because I was preparing for Yahweh's ENKI, but that's fine. So I could pivot back to Enlil. The only difference is I have another PowerPoint for that because I've heard that before too. And then I've also have another PowerPoint for the Anunnaki, the Elohim, right? So I have several PowerPoints. The one with Enlil, I didn't finish it because I was preparing this one for a Nuwabian brother who was supposed to debate me on the channel. He never came on here because he offered to debate me, right? So I will definitely finish that one. And when we have our next conversation, and there's a reason why, right? I'm gonna go over just briefly what's in the PowerPoint because I want everybody to see. Like my foundation is academic, so that is going to be the angle that I come from. So whenever there's an assertion made, I'm gonna say, okay, do you have enough ponderance of the evidence to transition that into a claim? Because we got to see the methodology, if it's inductive, if it's deductive, right? We got to see if you're using quantitative or qualitative data, right? If that's incorporated, we got to see what your hypothesis or hypothesis is prior to your thesis. And we got to go see what sources you're using, how you're vetting them, etc. So when I present data, it's going to be objectively from an academic perspective. You rarely, in a conversation like this, would ever hear me tell you what I believe. I don't use those words. I try to avoid those words, right? Because that's not what this conversation is about. Very similar to what you said or what you gave me in your introduction. You mentioned the word dogma. Well, here, this is what we do all day. That's the dogma. That's the stuff that we talk about on this channel. You know what I'm saying? And I like the term used, Greco-Roman interpretation, because we fight that all the time over here on this side, right? So I have a great book on that, and that talks about divination prior to the Greco-Roman establishment. And then it also goes into astrology, right? More so in the rooting of ancient Babylon that then continues back further about 1938 years, going back to the latest Babylonian dynasties before the Akkadians took the scene in Akkad as their root. But I want to put this on it so you can see kind of like how I work, because when I do the Enlil one, it has to be same way as this, right? So I'll present it on the screen right now. I'm gonna walk through it real quick, and then I'll give you another opportunity after I finish this to come back around and we can finish our dialogue with you speaking. Again, at any time, if you want me to share any portion of the book, it would only be a brief portion. I'm not going to run through your whole book. People need to buy it if they want to read it. But if there's a particular reference there that you need from me, or if you have one that you like to share on the screen, just let me know. Okay, brother? All right, got it. All right, so let me go ahead and pull this up real quick. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So yeah, you made me pivot a little bit because you said YHWH was ENKI. I was like, all right, so ready to go on that. But I mean, I can freestyle it in a little too, but I want to have something for the audience to actually, see what's going on. So we have an apologetic series. Yeah, we have an apologetic series. So anytime we hear somebody make a particular statement or claim that may be the minority voice amongst the consensus in academia, we definitely want to highlight that. And it's going to be part of our apologetic series, right? Because I have a personal disposition outside of my academic objective stance, right? So whenever I hear statements like this, and I know I draw the line in the sand, like that's definitely not the case. It's going to fall under what we call our apologetic series. So we're going to respond to the assertion, right, to see if it's a valid claim. So in this one in particular, as we see, this is YHWH is not ENKI, right? And we go into an introduction. Who is ENKI? Because first we have to lay the foundation stone, right? So I put together an introduction about ENKI, right, based on my scholarly understanding of it. ENKI, known as to the Akkadians and Babylonians as Ea, stands among the most enduring deities of the Mesopotamian pantheon, a god of the subterranean waters, Apshu, wisdom, creation, and ritual purification. Emerging from the earliest Sumerian strata, ENKI was venerated primarily at Eridu, one of Mesopotamia's oldest urban cities, where his temple, Abzu, house of the deep waters, served as the cultic heart of his worship. The Abzu itself symbolized a primordial freshwater reservoir beneath the earth, a cosmic source of fertility and life from which rivers, crops, and civilization were believed to flow. In iconography, ENKI is frequently depicted as a bearded figure wearing a horn crown, enthroned within watery architecture, with streams, the Tigris and Euphrates, flowing from his shoulders or arms, often populated by swimming fish. His animal symbol, the goatfish Capricorn, represents the union of terrestrial and aquatic realms. As the Lord of Incantation, ENKI Ashipu, ENKI embodied intellect, linguistic mastery, and magical expertise. He was regarded as the Num Dimud, he who fashions an Enlil Banda, Junior Enlil, epithets that emphasize both his creative and mediating functions. In mythic literature, ENKI operates as a divine engineer of cosmic and social order. In ENKI and the World Order, he transverses the world by barge, assigning destinies and offices to gods, cities, and natural domains, and instituting agriculture, crafts, and trade. In ENKI and Ninma and the Eridu Genesis, he plays the role of creator and savior of mankind, fashioning humans from clay mixed with divine essence to relieve the gods of toil, and later warning the righteous to use Sudra and the impending flood through the sidewall oracle, right? So over here, I have an actual cylinder seal depicting ENKI enthroned in the Apshu. This is the old Akkadian. So this is about second millennial. And then we have the streams of water that you see coming around him, right? Because his realm is the subterranean depths of the oceans, right? And you have the fish around him, as you can see here as well, right? So this is just going a little bit more into him. ENKI's wisdom manifests not only in benevolence, but in a distinctly trickster-like cunning. In Iana and ENKI, he becomes drunk and accidentally relinquishes the me, or the me. Some people say me, that's how they read it. The divine decrees of civilization to the goddess Inanna, only to see them transported to Uruk, symbolizing the fusion of culture and power. In ENKI and the Hirsaga, this is the one that you had mentioned earlier, his excessive generosity results in illness cured through divine childbirth, dramatizing the cylindrical interplay of desire, creation, and restoration. Later, Akkadian and Babylonian reinterpretations, especially in the Atrahasis and the Numa Elish, preserve this character. Ea remains the patron of humanity, the clever counselor who subdues Apshu, informs Atrahashis of the flood and advises Marduk and other gods through his wisdom of the heart, his Uznam Lebishu. Geographically, ENKI's cult radiated outward from Eridu through southern Mesopotamia, influencing religious centers in Nippur, and Lagash, and extending across the Persian Gulf to Dilmun, modern Bahrain. It says, where he was invoked as the source of fresh springs and maritime prosperity. His theological assimilation as Ea ensured his survival in later Assyro-Babylonian religion, where he remained a key member of the divine triad alongside Anu and Enlil. In the wider mythological geography of the ancient Near East, Enki Ea became a symbol of civilized intelligence, creative adaptability, and compassionate restraint, bridging the divine and human worlds through the fluid, life-giving medium of water and the power of the spoken word, right? And if you read this, you'll see some of those associations and correlations that people would then say, oh, yeah, Enki has to be Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh in the Hebrew Bible, or it's not. Right. So I have a couple of references there, right? This is just a few references that I use, Oxford, Cambridge, etc., that we use, Rosen Publishing, etc., right? And then I go through the primary sources. So I'll bring this up if we need to, right? I've got 12 major primary sources that make references to Enki. I also have some that make references to Enlil. It's about 13 of them. But in these 12, you have these sources right here, right? So if we need to go over these for primary text, we can go to them. So I'll go through all of these real quick, right? So I have them there for reference. I go into the iconography of Enki, which is important. Enki is consistently represented in Mesopotamian iconography as a bearded deity wearing a multi-horn crown, signifying divine authority. On Sumerian and Akkadian cylinder seals, Enki is shown seated on a throne within the watery domain of the Abzu, with two streams, identified as the Tigris and Euphrates, flowing from his shoulders or arms, often populated with fish swimming upstream. He is frequently accompanied by his two-faced vizier, Isimud, and Ushmu, who represents or presents petitioners before him, and surrounded by hybrid creatures such as the goatfish, Capricorn, and ibex, the Apkalu, the sages, very important because those are the ones who are responsible for entreating him, and emblematic of wisdom, water, and creation. Architecturally, Enki's primary temple, the Abzu of Eridu, embodied his domain. An edifice imagined as a building made of water-filled canals where offerings of fish bones and aquatic imagery have been archaeologically recovered. His symbols include the goatfish, streams of flowing water, the horn tiara, while the zodiacal sign of Capricorn and sometimes Aquarius were later equated to him. Enki's iconography thus fuses hydraulic fertility and cosmic engineering motifs, emphasizing his role as the Nud Dimud, the fashioner and lord of wisdom. So these are all epithets that are very distinct and unique to Enki. And these are some words that were said by the priests that actually worshipped him in the temples. And we found some of the offering bones and votive offerings in regards to Enki, right? So then we have an introduction to who Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh is. And I'll read this portion of it. I'm not going to read too much, but I'll get into it if we need to go back to it for reference. But here it says Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh. And again, I'm writing this. So for those of you watching, you don't get triggered. I'm writing this from a scholastic perspective, right? This is how we have to do this work when presenting our claims and situating into the consensus as well as the latest research on the subject matter. So I have to speak from this perspective. Those of you who are already home here or family, y'all know how we do. For those who are new, who are religiously dogmatic, you may be a bit triggered by it, but you have to listen to this because it's the truth behind the subject matter as discussed in academia, right? Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh, vocalized as Yahweh, emerges from the earliest strata of Northwest Semitic religion as a deity whose identity evolved from regional divinity to universal sovereign. The name's etymology, first revealed in Shemot 3:14, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I am who I am, reflects a self-defining being whose existence is dynamic and causative rather than static. Austin Searles argues that the Exodus narrative intentionally links Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh's name to his actions in history, not to metaphysical abstraction, defining him as the one who causes to be, that's in the Hethil stem, Yahweh, through redemptive acts rather than ontology. Archaeological and epigraphic data situate Yahweh's earliest attestations in the southern Levant. The Egyptian topographic lists from Soleb and Amara West from 14th to 15th century circa BCE record Ka Shashu, Yahu, identifying a nomadic group, the Shashu of Yahu, in the Edomite Midianite corridor, likely the ethnographical, geographical cradle of Yahwism. By the 9th century BCE, Yahweh appears unequivocally as a deity in the Misha Stele, where the Moabite king boasts of seizing the vessels of Yotewafeh from Nebo, King Nebo. The Kuntilet Adrud inscriptions, 8th century BCE, invoke Yahweh of Samaria and Yahweh of Temin, suggesting multiple regional manifestations and an early fusion of northern and southern cults. Parallel blessings, Yibirk, Wishmirk, echo the priestly benediction in Numbers 6:24, demonstrating liturgical continuity. Subsequent finds from Kerbet el-Kum, Lachish, and Ketef Hinnom attest to Yahweh's widespread veneration across Judah through the monarchic and pre-exilic areas. So I'm going to skip past all of this and go back to if I need it. But here's that biblical and extra biblical index. This is the first one is the biblical index as indicated at the top right. And then we go into some text from the Hebrew Bible or the Tanakh that kind of flesh out and delineate Yahweh in regards to his character, his behavior, and his origins as from the text. Then we have the extra biblical references here from archaeological texts, petroglyphs, etc. Again, I mentioned at the Soleb and Amarna West name list, the Moab Misha inscription, the Kuntilet Adrud or the Horvat Teman. And we have here the references to the Pithois that was used there, where we have writings on it in regards to Yahweh and Yehuda. You have Kerbet el-Kum, and here we have a reference to Yotewafeh and his Asherah, that we see that from the 8th to 7th century CE. Judah, again, the Lachish Astrakhan also mentioned Yotewafeh, so we kind of see the development over time. And then in Jerusalem, late 7th century, early 6th century, is the Ketef Hinnom amulets, which y'all are aware of because we sell those replicas here on this channel, right? So we have a synthesis, so we can kind of see how the development is. The earliest horizon Egyptian toponymy, the name Yotewafeh appears in the Shashu and Amenhotep's III Soleb list. Fleming concludes it is very clear, or it's very likely that the same name that later surfaces as the Israelite deity's name, though as Soleb, it donates a people name within Shashu's social units rather than an explicit God. This becomes the starting point for reconstructing Yahweh's pre-Israel history. And we go into Old Hebrew poetry and Southern geography, the epigraphic Yahwism in Iron Age 2, the name's theological profile that we've been to see in the literature or in the immaterial culture, and then El-Yahweh relationships in the Iron Age inscriptions where it says Yahweh and his Asherah, whereby they substituting Yahweh for El, right? So I'm going to keep running through more iconography. Then we go into a comparative theological contrast. So I'll save that. Comparative notes we have on that, forensic profile. So now we're looking at them in a chart and we're seeing what their correlations is and their differences are. So we go through all of that. Then I have, I'll say that for last. Then we have the scholarly consensus, right, on what is the contrast or comparison between Yotewafeh and ENKI. And again, I'll pull the one out on in Leo when we have a follow-up conversation. And then we also have a concluding statement, right? An academic concluding statement. Okay, so what are you saying? After all this information, what is your point? That's what our concluding statement is. That while both ENKI and Yahweh are divine figures associated with creation, wisdom, and the ordering of the world, they arise from entirely different theological universes. ENKI's mythology belongs to a polytheistic, pragmatic cosmos where wisdom manipulates pre-existent matter through ritual technology. Yotewafeh's theology, by contrast, articulates a moral and monotheistic cosmos where creation proceeds from divine will and revelation. The former represents the ingenuity of the artisan within nature, the latter, the sovereignty of a creator behind it, right? And I'm going to end off on this. So I wanted to run through that real quick. I didn't have time to read all of it. But if we need to reference it, we can. Or if you want to reference anything I put on the screen to go over and cross-examine it, I'm more than happy to do so. But I created this specifically to show people from an academic perspective that Yotewafeh is not ENKI. And I have additional appendices. I have a co-object and worship appendix, and also have ENKI in cosmology, astrology, and divination appendix. If you would like to go there as well, if you want to get into the cosmological, astrological, and divination systems and ritual motifs, we can go into that as well. So I just wanted to share that with y'all. And I'm a pull back please respond to the ENKI one, and then let's build on the Enlil one, right? Because I would love to kind of dive into that as well, to look at the shared cognates between Enlil and YHWH, their convergence as both are developing parallel, and what we have today, right? Is it a mishposh of both deities? Are they the same singular deity, or they're the diametrically opposed? All right, so you got it, brother. I'm gonna give you some time, and you go ahead and share your portion.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
So, hey, listen, I'm going to agree with you on this position. ENKI is not Yahweh. And looking at this, let's say purely from a mythological standpoint, from the Anunnaki and the biblical standpoint, because when you start to compare them, let's say through iconography, you definitely don't get similarities there. You definitely don't, right? And just based on the simplicity of Enki's role, his attributes, his actions among his own pantheon, not similar to Yahweh at the time among his pantheon. And particularly when we talk about Yahweh's actions in the Bibles, his reasoning for particular actions, Enki has narration that contradicts, let's say, the will and desire to do some of the things that Yahweh did. You see what I'm saying? So in other words, now I remember when you put the post up, right? And you said, is Yahweh Satan, right? And I was like, okay, this brother on the side. Like that's what I had to respond, right? I had to chime in. As I was like, no. That's why I said no. Yahweh is Enlil in particular. That's what I put on the post. And so
I want to say real quick. Now it says maybe you meant to put Enlil, but it did say ENKI.
You sure?
Well, let me double check, because I'm
double check.
sure that's what you said, and I did a screenshot, so I look it up. Let me confirm, and if I'm wrong, I stand corrected. No problem. Maybe you could agree on this one and move forward on Enlil. But yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So again, I could be mistaken, and I'm okay if I am.
Check it real quick.
Sure. Let me see. Oh, okay, I see it says Enlil. Okay. Oh, so you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I thought it was ENKI, but that's cool. I have a PowerPoint for that too, so I can just share it with the audience so that they're familiar with it. But we can freestyle with it too. I don't have a problem with that as well. But what I like you to do, since this is not your proposition that ENKI is your YHWH and is actually a proposition of another group, I would ask you to give a closing statement on that, and let's open up on the Enlil situation, right? So how would you close that? Would you say that you agree with what was presented, you disagree with it, or would you say you have a middle ground in regards to whether it is the case or not?
I agree with you. That, you put forth the factual evidence of both, right? And and then if I was to draw an objective conclusion, an objective opinion on if they are the same deity, no, I wouldn't say so. So I agree that ENKI is not Yahweh.
Cool. Now let's step away from that and let's move on to Enlil. So I'm gonna give you the floor. Give us your proposition in regards to Enlil being your YHWH, and then I'll follow up with some discussion from there. So you got it, brother.
Gotcha. And before I start, I wish I would have met you before I got to writing the book, because being a scholar on Hebrew anthropology and context is what I needed at the time. You feel what I'm saying? Because when you are a thorough student on the matter, you find primary sources that are rare. You feel what I mean? Rare, and you have a passion for making sure that we we understanding the absolute origin of whatever it is that we study. But so proposition is this as far as Enlil and Yahweh, right? Why do I think Enlil is Yahweh? Well, I'm gonna ask this question, and then I'm gonna get into it. But I just want to ask this question and see if you. I'm pretty sure you do, but I'm gonna ask a question anyway. From a biblical standpoint, from biblical perspective, where is Abraham from?
My bad, I had to hit mute, unmute. Well, yeah, the text says that Abraham first ventures from Ur of the Chaldeans, right? So that's where the text opens up about him in Bereshit 11.
Okay. So would you say that Abraham is he just venturing from Ur, and or did he live there and grow up there?
Yeah, so from the primary source itself, so I'll bring up the text so we can take a look at it. Let me see exactly what the text says. Okay, let me go to Bereshit 11. Okay, I'm going to start at verse 27. Let me stop this. Like that. And share this one. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Indeed. I can.
I have to make it bigger. Okay. All right. So we'll start at 27, where it says, "Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Avram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Avram and Nahor took wives. The name of Avram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren, she had no child." Verse 31, "Terah took Avram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah was 205 years, and Terah died in Haran." So I don't see anything here in regards to nativity. I think the focal verse would be the first clause in verse 28, where it says, "Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred," right? So Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred. So meaning family, right? In Ur of the Chaldeans. So we can imply that Abram more than likely grew up here, right? Or they could have been passing by because they've lived there for some time. The text really doesn't say where he was born, right? It does speak about his father, but it never says where he particularly was born. So according to the primary source, that's all the data we have. Now there's extra biblical data that people would lean on, but the authenticity of said data would have to be in alignment with the primary source or older than the primary source. So that would be my perspective there. But if you want to yield to where he kind of grew up or where he was a grown man at the very least, then I would say, yeah, it would be there in Ur, the Chaldeans. And this is anachronistic, by the way, but that's another conversation. But yeah, you got it, brother.
Okay. Also, too, I forget exactly what scripture it is. I think it's Joshua. I think 24 something. I forget exactly which one it is.
Oh, you can just tell me. I'll find it for you.
Okay. When he discusses Abraham and his descendants and them being from across the land and they worship other deities, right? More than likely, again, as far as it being extremely descriptive, no, right? But let's be I guess honest about this. When it comes to, let's say, religious texts in general, rarely is it very descriptive as far as, let's say from a anthropological standpoint. You see what I'm saying? So, but as far as where Abraham is from, most references lead back to, and the references are minimal, right? Let's just keep that in mind too. They are minimal, but they lead back to Ur of Sumer, because the city of Ur is in Sumer. That's what they're talking about, right? So just putting that point there, I think it would be advantageous and even enlightening if we can do a hard study, a deep anthropological hard study on Abraham's nativity, wherever he's from. But just assuming we're talking about, in the event that wherever Noah's boat landed at some point, at consequently somewhere in that region between the Tigris and Euphrates River, somewhere in that region, assumingly, right? But however that happens, 10 to 14 generations later, Terah, Abraham's father, obviously ends up in city of Ur, which is in Sumer. So by all accounts, if Abraham's father is from Sumer, and potentially Terah's father and everybody before them, or at least from the region, then that's essentially what stock they're from. If we had no other, if we could just assume it as no other evidence, we have to really take a look at it and say there's nothing else that tied. There's no other land of origin that's tied to Abraham. We assuming he's from Ur. We just have to say straightforward, Abraham is Sumerian. I have to say he's Sumerian.
Oh, to me? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I wouldn't. So I think the difficulty here is that the Chaldeans were not on the scene until the late 9th, going to 8th century. There's no Sumerians by the time the Chaldeans are alive. So this right here is a redaction of the text, and it's a revisionism of the text, because it is writing to its immediate audience at its time and when the Chaldeans overpowered Earth and they were the priesthood in Ur. They were not alive when the Sumerians were in existence. There was no Chaldeans and Sumerians alive parallel to one another.
Interesting. So if the Chaldeans showed up after the Sumerians in that area, then what was it, Babylon that they were?
No, not so. It depends on where you put the timing. So the consensus timing for those who work with text, they situate Abraham during the Middle Bronze Age period. During the Middle Bronze Age period, there are no Sumerians in existence. They don't come. The Akkadians overtake them. Their culture persists, and these people themselves have migrated out of that region of Earth. But the Akkadians is in power at that time, and we don't get another kind of a revival into the I would say into the around the 18th century BCE, where we have the overtaking of Ur and those city-states south by the Amuru kingdom, right? Or the Amuru would be the Amorites, as we see Hammurabi in 1750 BCE, right? But prior to that, there's no Sumerians that are alive at this time when Abraham is alive. And I've seen people make these statements, but looking at the text and the internal inconsistencies of the text, like Chaldeans, because that's 9th century, which is interesting because a lot of history happens during the 9th century. So whoever's writing this is writing it to an immediate audience, hence why Chaldeans is an anachronistic term. And if that's the case, then the Sumerians are already long gone. Their culture survives amongst the Akkadians. So there's no mention of an ENKI or Enlil. They're using their Akkadian names. And the reason why we're able to reconstruct their Sumerian names is through the Akkadian names morphology. And when you look at the morphology of the Akkadian names, you see that these are loan words and that these are not native words to East Semitic, because Sumerian is a language isolate. So it's going to have forms within its morphology that betrays it and let us know that wherever the Akkadians are getting this from is not from within their own culture or any forms within their own language, that it comes from another language that predates them that they have overtaken. So when you look on a map or an atlas where Akkad is at, And when you have the earliest reference to Uruk and the Uruk dynasties, Akkad then becomes an empire that then overwhelms the Sumerians. I have a great book about that I'll show in a second, but I just wanted to kind of give some of the scholarly consensus on that. But you got it, brother.
Good context, good context. So in other words, what we're saying here, like you said, there's just a misrepresentation on chronological narrative, because it states right in the Bible, he's a Chaldean from Ur. But like you were saying, the Chaldeans in the city of Ur existed at 2 different times. Okay. So how, we can pin that as far as how do we rectify something like that going forward with the biblical narrative? You feel what I'm saying? Because it doesn't say he's a Chaldean from an Akkadian city. It doesn't say he's a Chaldean from a Babylonian city. It says he's a Chaldean from Ur. Ur was Sumer. You feel me? So I know, and this is, I think, I respect about you greatly, that you're willing to do the anthropology along with the narrative, the biblical narrative, which becomes difficult because, like, trust me, because when I was writing this book, I was trying to tie it together too and make it make sense, right? But what we realize is, potentially here is what we have is, and we'll get into this later Christian writers who I believe hijacked the Hebrew religion overall and began to fabricate things, right? But this is the thing. This is the, and now I would, because one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I want indigenous and original Hebrew text, right? Because if we're going by the Bible, and even if we're going by the Torah says Abraham is a Chaldean from Ur. The Torah says that, right? So any subsequent biblical narrative is based on that Pentateuch. You feel me? So just somewhat from a primary source, like I say, just trying to tie the anthropology into it, but just looking at the biblical narrative as is, or the Torah narrative as is stating that Abraham is a Chaldean from Ur, and even in Joshua is stating that your father is from a land beyond where he worshipped other deities. Hinting.
So let me say this. So for the Torah, so we just read out of the Torah, right? So we read the book of Bereshit, which is derived from the Leningrad Codex, right? So you had the Aleppo Codex, the Leningrad Codex, which is a text type family that comes from the scribal pens of the Ben Masoretes, right? So that is one tradition that includes the diacritic marks or the nukud that are on their scrolls or their manuscripts at this time. So that is representative of what we have in English Bibles or English translations today. So we did read out of the Torah. Now, there are other representations of the Torah. When you mention the Pentateuch is going to be the Greek version of the Torah. That's where the word penta is 5 in Greek, in Koine Greek, and tuk means writing. 5 writing, right? Just like the Chumash would be the Hebrew for the first 5 books of Moshe that we then call the Torah, right? So we read it from the Torah. Now, there's other works outside of that. Like I got the pseudepigraphal libraries. I could bring those up in a second, volume 1 and volume 2, that go into this, where it then expounds on the heavy idolatry that Terah was engaging in, that Abraham was trying to remove himself from, right? But the language in it is too late to put it back into the Bronze Age or even the Iron Age 2 period, where we get the 9th century reference to the Chaldeans. The language in that text comes later, around 500-600 years later, meaning that it is no longer accurate in place names. It is no longer accurate in the frequency of usage of giving names. And then also trade routes that it mentions in there were no longer in existence at the time in which Abraham would have existed. So that's why when we see extra biblical books, not all of them, but a majority of them that are pseudepigraphal writings, why we can date them chronologically much later than we can parallel to either the events that are mentioned in the book of Genesis and or anything historically that may remotely have any vestige of Abraham or his travelings in that region, with the lack of insufficient archaeological evidence, right? So you got it, brother.
Indeed.
Now, wait, did you say he was Chaldean as well? Are you saying that he was a priest? Because that's a question that somebody's asking. I just want to make sure I didn't miss that either. Is
No,
that your
I,
position, brother?
no, I was just referencing exactly what it says. He's a Chaldean from, well, he's a Chaldean from Ur, right? So I'm just spitting it as it stated. I didn't. Let me see. It says here, wait, where it said Abraham is a Chaldean. Nowhere in the text does it say he was a Chaldean. Can we validate that? But wait, you muted, brother. You muted.
My bad. Yeah, I want to make sure I don't overtalk you. That's why I was make sure I mute, right? But what I was saying is that I don't see any reference that says he was a Chaldean, because if he was Chaldean, then he would be a Babylonian according to the narrative, and then he would not be from the lineage of his father Terah, his father's father, his father's father, because in Genesis 10 we get the lineage from what we call Babylon or whatever. We get that development from a totally different lineage of family. So he could not be Chaldean, because if he was, then it wouldn't align with a chapter prior, which is Genesis 10, that goes into the delineation of family groups, languages, and borders that are established according to the delineation of peoples and overseeing deities in Genesis chapter 10. So I'll give you an example. Let's go ahead and read. I go to Genesis chapter 10 so you can see. Now, again, the stuff that you're saying, we have sources for them, but it's not in this Torah, right? But they do exist. So let me remove this, and I'm going to go back up the Bible, because, again, if I'm wrong, I stand to be corrected. I'm going to go back to Genesis chapter 11. I'm going to go to chapter 10. And here we have the separation of people groups, or what we call the ethnogenesis of people groups that come forth from Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Right. So here, the sons of Ham is Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Right. And then we have the sons of Cush. Then we have Nimrod. Right. So Nimrod is the one that is responsible for the beginning of the kingdom Babel. So the Chaldeans are considered Babylonians, even though they've migrated and settled in that region. Again, talking about the 9th century and the Iron Age 2 period. But we see that Nimrod is responsible for the erection of Babel, Erech, Akkad. And Akkad is where we get the Akkadians, right? That's also southern Mesopotamia, Calne, and the land of Shinar, right? So he is the establisher of Babel. So the problem with that would be is that when we get down to Shem, and we have to find out, well, where's Avram coming from and where his lineage coming from? We see is that Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, the elder brother of Japheth, children were born, right? The sons of Shem is Elam, Ashur, Arpachshad, Lud, Aram. And the sons of Aram was Uz, Hul, Geter, and Mash. Arpachshad, it says Arpachshad is fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. To Eber were born 2 sons. The names of the one was Peleg, from the days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan fathered Almodad, Shelef, Azar Maveth, Jereth, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abi Ma'el, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Yobav. It says all these were the sons of Joktan. The territory in which they live extended from Misha in the direction of Shafar to the hill country of the east. These are the sons of Shem by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations, right? So when we look at a genealogy of Abraham, we'll see that he's coming from the lineage of Shem, right? His father Terah, his grandfather coming from this lineage. But the establishment of Babel, or even anywhere in the south where Akkad is at, Erech, Calne, Shinar, these are all city-states that's in southern Mesopotamia. So whoever is living there would have been fathered by these patronymic ancestors, right? So Abraham would not be a Chaldean, because by proxy, he would have to be initiated into the priesthood system under the tutelage of whoever the king of Babylon is, and whoever the high priest of that time was as well, right? So we're talking all the way back in Middle Bronze Age period. We don't have that for the Babylonian Empire, whether it's the I would say the Hammurabi or the late Neo Babylonian Empire. There's no, Abraham could not have fit under any of those as a priest, because he definitely would not be migrating north to Haran, and definitely would not be going into Canaan, because as a priest, you have to stay close to the temples and serve the gods in the temples. So there's no way he could be that, because they would not even consider moving to Canaan by way of Haran if he was a Chaldean priest or inducted into the Chaldean priesthood. That's just my position. Yeah.
I feel you. I feel you. So with this breakdown, do we have a consensus? Do we have a conclusion on, let's say, exactly where Abraham is from, where he grew up?
Yeah, so I'll yield. I'll yield to that in regards to what we see in Genesis 11. I have no problem with that. What I was just saying is that it's not Sumer. Just like when you look up the Chaldeans and the Sumerians, there's nowhere in history that they're ever parallel to one another. So there's no Sumerian culture at this point in that region, right? So there's no Sumerians. There is some influence by way of the Akkadians, but the Sumerians themselves are not directly influencing that region, because they're no longer are dominant in that region, and most of those people groups have migrated out of that region after the Akkadians took over.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I had a source up, and in the source, this is the textbook, right, that goes into the empires of Mesopotamia, and in this textbook, it kind of gives a lot of the things that we're talking about, so we can see where the timeline is at in Mesopotamia in regards to the Sumerian kings, their dynasties, and we can see where they're cut off. So what I think what I want to show you this is for is I want to show you where Abraham is situated in history in the timeline, and when the Sumerian city-states and rulership ends, right? So, and maybe you can see what I'm talking about. I'm just simply saying that there's no way he had direct interactions with the Sumerians, because they're long gone, hundreds of years before he comes on the scene, right? So here's this. All right, I don't know if you can see it. I don't know why it's blurry on my side, but I'm going to get you here. So we have Lugal Zagisi of Uruk, and that's about 2340 to 2316 BCE is where we're going to get our final king of that fledgling city-state of Uruk. And these are the dynasties of Uruk. Ur and Uruk, which are two different regions, but we have the city-states of Uruk, Kish, Umma, and Lagash. So Uruk is where we have the stronghold of the Sumerians at, and Ur is one of the sister city-states, right, where we see that Abraham appears on. But that was his last reign before he was off the scene. Abraham is situated to come upon the scene anywhere between 2100 BCE to about 2250 BCE, or even slightly later than that. It depends on how we syncretize the events mentioned in the Bible to what's going on in the ancient Near East outside the Bible at that time.
How do we synchronize events that are going on to the Bible to what's actually going on? Are there dates in the Bible that corroborate that?
Yeah, the Bible doesn't have dates because Genesis is not an administrative text. So unless you have an administrative text, you're not going to have a date. So in Genesis chapter 10 and 11 that we read, there are no dates. So syncretism works is when a scholar in archaeology is looking at an event that's happening, let's say it's happening amongst the Hittites, and the Hittites are mentioning trade routes, place names, and regions outside of their rule, right, the immediate realm. They're mentioning loan words. They're mentioning names, right, that are loaned to them as well, and events that are happening elsewhere in their domain. So when they mention these things, we create a profile and we say, okay, if we take this information, is anybody else in history mentioning these same things? So a good example of that is looking at battles, right? So the Battle of Kadesh that we have between the Pharaoh and we have the ruler of Hittite. So the Battle of Kadesh, they mention this same battle. So when we look at this battle, we look at other things that's happening in the empires, that I'm able to tell that, okay, while this battle is going on, this is who's ruling, this is who's reigning, This is what's being exported. This is what's being imported, right? Because we have all this in administrative tax. And then we have the same thing over here in Egypt. And with that syncretism, we can now see, oh, okay, when these events were going on in Egypt, the inundation of now, July, August, and what we have over here in regards to the heavy rains that's happening in the Hittite region, we can tell that these phenomenons are happening at the same time, right? So that's the way that we syncretize. If we go to the Bible, we'd have to isolate everything away from Abraham and say, okay, what else is the text saying that's happening? So the first thing is look at place names. How old are the place names being referred to here? Now we know is a very old place name because we see it amongst the Sumerian rules, right? But the Akkadians took over as well. So we know this is an actual city, but if they mention of the Chaldeans, now we have to mean who's the Chaldeans and how are they connected to When did they migrate there? What were they rule and reign? Were they a priesthood class? Were they a common class? Were they agriculturalist, pastoralist class? That's how we start to kind of figure out what's going on and why the author is writing this. So if the author is writing it while the Chaldeans were in power at now we're talking about the 9th century CE. If Abraham did exist at that time, you have a big problem because it's going to be very difficult to fit in the Exodus at this time. Because in the 9th century, the Egyptians are now taken over by the Nubians in the south. So the events that we hear happen in the Exodus, there's no way that could fit in. For example, Pyramses. Pyramses is the name of a granary that was established in what we call Avaris. And Pyramses is mentioned in Genesis much later on. Well, that's older than we have the Chaldeans. Pyramses will be around the 12th century, right? 13th, 12th century. By the time we get the Chaldeans, that's 9th century. So that's about 300 years removed from one another. So either there's an issue with the redaction and the author did not understand that the Chaldeans were not around the same time at that Abraham would have existed, and or it is an anachronistic text and where they're writing to their immediate audience and say, hey, remember that place of Yeah, you remember the Chaldeans was there? The Babylonians? And, oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's where Abraham is from. So Chaldean is just a point of reference to know the region that Abraham was at, to the audience the text was being written to at the time it was being written. Not today, but at the time that is being written. So that's how we reconcile that. Right.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, so in other words, we're saying Abraham can't be a Chaldean. And if he's from the city of around the city of had any relation to the city of at all, it is from a later conquered Akkadian version of
That's correct, brother. That's my stance. I'm just going to say that. That's just my stance.
Well, I think you gave objective reasoning there, right? So with that being said, if he was from, if he's associated with that city, and from, because mind you, what I'm asking here is biblical scholarship, because I'm not a biblical scholar. You see what I'm saying? So I'm asking biblical scholarship. So if we're saying that we're scratching Chaldean, and the only thing we have left is right? So if he's related to in any way, an old ancient, a later conquered Akkadian city of in which the Akkadians pretty much took over the same religion that the Sumerians had, right? They worship pretty much worship. The names may have changed to some extent. Patron deities may have shifted around from city to city, but they were still pretty much practicing quote unquote Sumerian religion and or mythology. All right. So if he's related to it in any way, he's going to have some of this influence. At least his family is going to have some of that influence, which his family is going to pass that on to him. Now, so with that being said, now I'm glad we had that breakdown. Very insightful.
Let's get into the gods. You got it, brother.
but that's listen, I'm gonna say this to you because many people are very squeamish about having that conversation. Like, what was the narrative and what was the motivation of the gods? Like, a lot of people don't want to get into the conversation that hold on real quick. Let me quiet.
My family about to come on soon too, so I completely understand.
Um, so just taking a look at the again the motivations of the gods and how do we transfer from polytheistic spiritual practices to monotheistic spiritual practices, and that's essentially what happens with Yahweh, right?
Now,
You
just so you know, I don't subscribe to monotheism.
you say you don't subscribe to what now?
Monotheism.
Oh, got you.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay.
I just want to explain that's a staple in regards to my proposition when I respond, because that's very important to note, because a lot of believers that you will speak to today, they identify as adherents of monotheism,
Right.
especially pure monotheism, which does not exist, because if pure monotheism did exist, you can't have a Bible, because there's other entities in it that are mentioned, that are referenced, that are worshipped, that are revered. There's no way you can have pure monotheism and have other gods in your Bible. But go ahead, you got it.
Indeed. And so that transition, primarily through, I mean, because and for most spiritual practices around the world, mostly polytheistic, until quote unquote Abrahamic religion begins to spread across the world, right? Then the practice of particularly in Abrahamic religious realm, monotheism becomes a bigger thing. The some of the, well, let's say one in particular that's very strong that we can reference that began to bring some level of focus back to a quote unquote singular source was Akhenaten's campaign in Kemet, right? He wanted to bring everything back to Aten in a sense, and he was somewhat against a I guess a form of idolatry. In other words, people outside worshiping trees and blades of grass and animals and all that jazz, right? But so when we think about again, I made that point about Abraham because him being at least related to that area of Sumer, right? Like you say, which becomes Acadia, becomes Babylon, which becomes Persia, so forth and so on. And all of those civilizations pretty much kept the same mythology, even down to the Persians. They were pretty much, to some extent, worshiping some level of, some version of Anunnaki mythology, right? But getting to Enlil in particular, when we start to make a reference between Enlil and Yahweh, I guess one of the main Anunnaki epics that you want to look at is the story of Atrahasis, right? The story of Atrahasis, and my stance is Atrahasis was the original Noah. Say it again. My stance is Atrahasis is the original Noah. Anybody in the audience who's watching, just go look up the epic of Atrahasis. And you want to look at a translation that is either done by Stephanie Dalley or Thorkid Jacobson. I'll say it again: Stephanie Dalley or Thorkid Jacobson. More than likely, you may find them as reference points on the same translation as far as Anunnaki epics go. And so in the story of Atrahasis, you get several coinciding actions, motivations,
I
and
just want to see, brother. You see Tiffany Dalley's work up here?
yeah, I do indeed,
Okay, all right, got it.
indeed. She is one of the foremost or respected translator of Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian epics. All right, along with Thorkid Jacobson, him as well. But when you get into the story of Atrahasis, you realize there is a form of Genesis, a type of Genesis, not quite like it is in Genesis in the Bible, but because it looks like the story is told from the perspective of the gods, not from the perspective of humans looking down up at the heavens. Right? It gives you much more motivation onto why humans were created. I'm sorry, it gives you much more perspective as to why creation was started in the same format that it was conveyed in biblical text. So the story of Atrahasis includes a narrative on the gods, eventually performing work. In other words, creating what would be deemed as a Garden of Eden. Them getting tired of doing that work, them then hiring and or delegating tasks to their lower class citizens, the lower class citizens of the Anunnaki themselves. And at this time, they were calling them the Ajiji. They delegated to them to have them developing and or terraforming this area, I should say. And it gets to a point to where those lower class gods, the Ijiji, essentially strike. They throw a whole strike and say, listen, the work is too hard, we're dying, we're not getting paid enough, and it's just dangerous, right? So what they did was, since Enlil was in charge of this, because Enlil is the successor to Anu's throne, because his mother is of a different stock than ENKI's. In other words, they're half brothers. They're not full-blooded brothers. Right? Enlil's mother is of some royal stock. ENKI's is not. And so Enlil is the one that is essentially playing the role of let's say administrator or executor of the estate, in a sense. All right. So he's put in charge to pull a lot of the strings on what's going to go on with these Anunnaki projects, these Anunnaki objectives. ENKI, on the other hand, he's more of the scientist. In other words, it's like if there was a lab, Enlil has manager role over the lab. ENKI is just the scientist. All right. ENKI is just a scientist. He ends up having to always kind of consort with his brother against his own better will. And when it comes to creating these different batches of humans that they create. All right. So in other words, when we talk about a Nephilim and then a later version of humans and so forth and so on, the story of Atrahasis gives you some level of insight into that.
All right, so let me ask you a question real quick. So what allows you to see the convergence or the perpendicular point between what we see in the Akkadian myth of Atrahasis, because this is a retelling of the Sumerian original? Where do you see that those convergent lines overlap into the Bible? Are you talking about the cosmogony accounts, the anthropogenesis accounts? Where do you see, like, how do you see that overlap? That's really my interest, where that convergence point is.
Gotcha. The major theme of the Atrahasis story is the deluge. Mm-hmm. It's the deluge. And when you take a look at the reason the deluge was sent, it speaks of Enlil being angry with the humans because they quote unquote made too much noise. Right? They quote unquote made too much noise. When you see what type of quote unquote noise they were making, or you look into that to see, what type of things these humans were doing that upset Enlil, right? And why would Enlil be upset with these particular actions that these humans are doing? You're going to get a different, a different perspective. To Yahweh, it was sin. To Enlil, it was these humans are not, they're not going according to my law, and thus they are going to either make themselves extinct or they're going to mess up this environment.
All right. So the question is, so now we get to talk about the convergent points. So Enlil is disturbed. His peace is disturbed because these humans that they've created have become too noisy. So he attempts to first depopulate them via plague. It is unsuccessful. Okay. Then he tries additional means. It's unsuccessful. Ultimately, a flood is decided. So if we're looking at the biblical account, YHWH is the deity mentioned in Bereshit 6. And this deity himself is not a subordinate. So Enlil still a subordinate. So Enlil still has OGs. Just like ENKI is, sometimes he's subordinate to his brother Enlil. Sometimes they're working in tandem. It depends on the epic that we're looking at. But YHWH, at least in Genesis 6, as it's laid out, is technically the architect of everything. He is the OG of everything, as reference back to the original creation in Bereshit 2. So YHWH, at this point, the characteristics, the behavior, the origins of this deity, let's say it's a storm deity, right? And then we have Enlil, Anu, who's their father, and then we have ENKI, who's the subordinate little brother. I call him like the little brother of Enlil. For sin, there's no intrinsic value or devalue of sin in the Atrahasis epic. So mankind is technically not rebelling. Mankind is disturbing the peace of the gods. Now we'll see this in the Neo-Babylonian epic of Enumelish, because in this case, the younger gods are disturbing the elder gods. And that's when the Anunnaki get involved, right? And where Marduk gets some assistance in defeating Tiamat. So we see that the epic is inconsistent based on the culture it's going to for the initial purpose of said flood, but there are strong correlations because they're coming from the same lineage of myth and the greater epic. So epic is a longer story. Myth is little pieces within that longer story, right? So when you see this overlap, if you know that it's not really sin, the text is not really saying the word sin in Genesis 6, is really that there's these watchers, these Bene Ha-Elohim, that are going into these women and producing these children, as you mentioned earlier, the Nephilim. Well, we don't see that in the Atrahasis epic prior to a flood. Is there a point in the Atrahasis epic in which there is some kind of mating ritual occurring that is illicit and is the precipice of the flood coming? What would you say that turning point or that pivot point would be in the Atrahasis epic? And I'll put it on the screen in case people want to follow as well, so we know what we're talking about.
Got you.
Mm-hmm.
In the Atrahasis epic,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a direct, let's say, group of Ijiji and or Anunnaki that are going down and sleeping with human women. No.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Instead, there is a methodology in the process of creating humans where they're using an Anunnaki DNA. You see what I'm saying? That's essentially what happened. Because again, it's like we're not going to see an exact plagiarism from Anunnaki epic to biblical narrative. No, but what we see is, like you say, for more or less compelling comparisons, right? Compelling comparisons is what we see. So, so no direct Anunnaki influence with human women in particular,
Mm-hmm.
and then but when you look at the biblical narrative of it, like you say, it is essentially still polytheistic in a sense, because like I said, I mean, you don't necessarily have quote unquote gods, but you have beings that are somewhat on the level, aka angels.
So let me ask you a question. So when you see the Bene Elohim in Genesis 6, are you equating them to who? Are you equating them to the Anunnaki? Are you equating them to the Igigi? Who are you relating that class of celestial beings to in Genesis chapter 6? Because if we're going to do the one-to-one mapping, we have to show some kind of direct correlation. So who would you say that group is in Genesis 6? That's not the Elohim. That's the Bene Elohim. So who would you say that class is congruent with in the Atrahasis epic?
That's a good question. I mean, if I was going to compare, you got to forgive me. What was that term you just used? The Ben Elohim.
Yeah, that's in Genesis 6. Yep, the sons of God. That's what it's called in the Bible. I'll bring
I,
it up real quick so I can show you what I'm talking about.
I
I want to
would
make
compare
sure we're on the same
them.
page. Mhm.
I would compare them to him because it was one of the Ijiji who was, essentially a lower class Anunnaki whose blood they did use to begin to create humans. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so here, so we have three classes of celestial beings, right, in Genesis 6, right? So we're gonna identify all three of them. The first one is when man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, that's one, saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then Yotewafe said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. Verse 4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. So those three classes of beings, you have Yotewafe. So who would he be mapped to in Atrahasis? Who would the sons of God be mapped to in the Atrahasis? And who would the Nephilim be mapped to in Atrahasis? This is where we can really see a strong convergence point to begin to say the preponderance of the evidence is heavily relying on the fact of the direct influence of the Atrahasis onto the Genesis account. So who would we liken those three orders of beings to? So we have two domains. We have the Atrahasis domain from Akkadian at this point, which is borrowing from Sumer. And then we have this younger domain, right, which is being told by these Israelite scribes in regards to Yahweh. And they both are coming from streams that lead back to one pool, right, or one summit point, right, where these rivers are coming down on. So we see this one here is a little bit higher. This one is a little bit lower, but they're coming from the same summit point. So if we were to make these correlations to tell somebody, see, look, you see, Yotewabe here is Enlil, or you see, yeah, the sons of God here, they're the Igigi, or you see here the Nephilim is so-and-so. Like, how would we map that up so that somebody can see without a shadow of doubt and be like, oh yeah, you're right. I see the direct influence there, as opposed to a flood epic, which can be found as far away as Kemet. So
Well,
how would we show that?
no, we're not going to find direct correlations there because you only
Okay.
have Anunnaki level and then you have an GG level, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
that's only two levels. You don't have such a complex deistic level in Anunnaki versus you do in the Bible. You see what I'm saying? But like I say, the when it comes to the creation and the characters involved, um, the Anunnaki epics are more or less poetic in a sense. Don't really get entirely into let's say like groups of people like that.
Now
Let's
you
say
got to say that. You got to say that again because so people can understand it. Because it's written in poetical form, not prose. Prose is what we get from the narrative of Genesis 6. So in poetry, like you said, you're going to have stanzas, you're going to have lines, and you're going to have different junctures and other elements that's contained within poetry that is not designed to align with a narrative, and that's why it's formatted that way. So can you please reiterate that so that people can understand what you mean by that? That's a great point.
absolutely, absolutely. So when you get to reading Anunnaki epics, I mean, what you're going to notice is, like you say, it's written in stanzas, and a lot of things are repetitious. You'll see that, right? I mean, it's I think the Anunnaki, well, let's say the conveyance of Anunnaki epics was more designed to speak to the population at the time of those areas,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time, you know, uh, their mindset was more set on, let's say, a well, Rome didn't exist yet, but let me say a more romantic conveyance of the spiritual system. You see what I'm saying? So you're going to get. I mean, in the Anunnaki epics, you see some detail, right? Look, don't get me wrong. Atrahasis epic is probably one of the longest ones that's out there, right? So you do get some detail, but again, it is just repetitious. But getting back to your point, like you say, you
Okay,
do
so
not.
I want to do this. I'm gonna room, my brother. So I have to wrap up. So I'm gonna give you 5 minutes just to close out. We definitely got to do. Are you available next Friday?
Man, we can do this whenever you want to, bro.
Okay, got it, got it. All right. So what I would love for you to do is just give you 5 minutes to wrap up because I do have to go, unfortunately. And then I'll take a few minutes to wrap up, and then we'll set up our next session, hopefully for next Friday, right? If all goes well, if that's okay with you.
Sounds good to me, bro.
All right, good. I'm a mute and let you go, brother. You got 5 minutes to wrap up everything you were saying. So you can either do what you were saying or give your ending point like you was just leading off into. It was totally up to you.
Yeah, let's end it off here. So, like you say, but the flood story, the deluge story, is very compelling in this because when you get to reading the Atrahasis story, again, you see Enlil get upset with humans. He sends drought, he sends famine, and then eventually he sends a flood. Right? Eventually he sends a flood. Um, After the fact, he feels some kind of way about it, but he does it. So again, it's like I say what it seems like is the Anunnaki story is much more of a narration from the God's perspective, in contrast to you looking at a God and he's mysterious and you do not know what his motivations are, right? Or you do not know the behind the scenes actions that led to what the humans that he's interacting with perceive his actions or perceive his motivations to be. You see what I'm saying? So lastly, ENKI in this thing, ENKI is the one that actually told the Trahasis to build the boat, same way Noah was told to build a boat to survive the flood. Right? Same way he was told. So, and what it looks like is here is
Before you go, I just want to add this real quick, and I'm gonna step back. So, who gave the commission to build the boat in the Atrahasis epic? Now, I'm asking you. So, okay, so shifting away from Enlil. So Enlil's will or decree is being subverted by ENKI at this point, right? Okay, go ahead.
Well, and to make it really brief, because we'll pick up on it next time. Enlil wanted to kill all humans. ENKI did not. Uh, Basically, every time Enlil sent a catastrophe, ENKI thwarted his plans to help humans survive. Enlil finds out that ENKI's doing this. He said, brother, I'm gonna need you to sign this form. So like, don't get in my way again, bro. Like matter of fact, I'm gonna send a flood. I need you to sign on this paper that you promise not to get in the way this time, because I'm trying to kill these people. We got things to do, right? And so he reluctantly, but he agrees. He reluctantly agrees, but he still finds a way to convey the message to a Trahasis in order to build this boat. And I mean, as far as the dimensions and as such of the boat, as far as what he told them to build the boat out of, and who's going to be on the boat. Doesn't go into as much detail as the Noah story, but still very compelling as far as comparisons go. Right. And so I'll end it right there. Until next time, brother, until we have some more time to go into some more things and make some more comparisons.
Right. So I love it, my brother. Now, the only concern that I have is why did you start with Atrahasis instead of Utnapishtim? That would be more original to the Sumerian account than what we have later in the Atrahasis epic. So why are you starting with the Atrahasis epic? Just curious.
Because the Atrahasis epic, well, let's say when we get into later nations that begin to move into the area, they're the ones that are writing the stories that are the most similar to, let's say, biblical narrative, right? You see what I mean? Because again, we want to highlight, who's writing who's writing stories and changing them to start to fit narratives. I mean, what we start to find is the same way, most indigenous spiritual practices were kind of changed and plagiarized over the years, we start to see that there's a correlation between them. We start to see a correlation between all of the fabricators, all of the plagiarizers, right? So that's why I started with that one. I mean, like you say, because Daly and Jacobson, they all primarily translators of Akkadian text, which I found was interesting because, like you say, there's a different there's Sumerian text and then there's Babylonian and Akkadian.
I mean, you can get Black, you can get Samuel Kramer, you can get other, renowned Sumerian scholars. They do have some translations out, right? Obviously, they're dated; they need to be reworked. But the work can be done. And some Assyriologists that I've met at the ASOR conference and the ARCE conference, they've done that. There's textbooks on it that they have, right? It's just not available to a lot of us. So what I'm doing, and these things cost $1,000, I'm trying to get all of those things because. So the reason why I mentioned my Patreon, just so that you're aware, is that on the Patreon we're already familiar with all of this. Like I share as at least 800 books on there, right, and about 300 scholarly articles on there. So the people that follow this channel, we're not going to be the typical believers that you run into. You know what I'm saying? Because we have a whole different mindset over here. Hence why you see me have red, black, and green on, etc. It's a little different over here. You know what I'm saying? But they are familiar with these epics. So this is not foreign to them, right? So we talk about this on here all the time, right? We go into the ancient Near East. I go against the Hebrew background against the ancient Near Eastern background. I discuss things such as comparative cultural analysis, when we look at the culture of the people, how things are derived from their rudimentary culture and how they kind of elevate into this personification of elements that's in nature, and they personify it to the sky. And then they start assigning these deities to different works and realms of society, trades, and or parts of nature, whether it's celestial or terrestrial, right? We go into details about that. We go into the development of the Israelites, where they come from, especially what I read from off the PowerPoint presentation is how we use archaeology and the text, which is called the material and material cultures converge and create this larger story as to exactly what's come about. We go into the Anunnaki, we talked about several times. There's sources on here where they can read the primary sources. I give them this site right here, which is very important. This is where a lot of Sumerian scholars use the electronic text corpus of the Sumerian literature. So in here, you can search any primary text, and from here, read any Sumerian primary text. I also supplied a Sumerian grammar on here, a Sumerian lexicon. It's all on the Patreon so people can make their way through the text themselves. I also have a course on Sumerian as well. So this is stuff that is not new to us, right? So this audience is thoroughly familiar with that. They have the repository in the community. They have all the references. I have videos on here from conferences that I've been to, knowledge that I've shared from Kemet to Mesopotamia. So I like when we have more people like you on here to talk about these things, because what it does is that it helps to refresh what they've covered and to see why it's relevant today. A lot of believers say, oh, I ain't got to know nothing about the Anunnaki, about ENKI, none of that. They say that until somebody takes a piece of thread and starts to pull it, and it starts to unravel, and they start to see this bigger tapestry that is compared against the ancient Near Eastern sister cultures to just those believers, that small sect that they call the Yahwist cult that was in Judea, right? So they need to see the bigger picture. You got to make them uncomfortable, right? You got to say certain things to make them squeamish and trigger them. And you have to do that so they can move away off of this, I don't even know what to call it, like this stone encasing of dogma, and that's been given to them by, like you mentioned, the Greco-Romans initially, who subverted the cultures, and then now they've been given it back by Europeans, who then gave it to their ancestors to say, read this, believe this, and this is who you are, right? And stripping and removing them of West and Central African culture and migrations coming from the Northeast Africa, right? So we take a look at this from a broader perspective. We take into account astronomy. Oh, thank you. I don't know what happened. We have text in regards to astrology, divination, horoscopic studies, and it's good to be well versed like this, to have the patience for these type of conversations, because some people don't. And the only time that you don't have patience is when you lack knowledge, right? But if you increase in knowledge, and our knowledge is designed to better edify not only our people, but build systems and institutions. So we have an institution called the Ezra Institute, where we use these methods to teach and rear our children. So if we identify as an Israelite, and it's not from a Judeo-Christian perspective, it's from what we call a pre-exilic perspective. Before any of this came on the scene, before Judaism is rubbing shoulders with Zoroastrianism or any of those cultic groups that arise during that period of time, and also acknowledging what came before writing-wise, but then also see where the summit is at, and then how everything then streamed along from that one summit. Hence why you see the religion across all genres of anthological literature in the ancient Near East, right? So when we get on here again, we'll go more specifics about Enlil. What I would like you to do is create a profile. Create a profile of Enlil, create a profile of YHWH, and show me from those two domains where they map.
Gotcha.
And I think that'll probably be the best way to show my audience, who's more visual, hence why I had the PowerPoint, to actually see these correlations, right? And be able to further understand what your position is without judgment. And I think that that's the key thing. People have to let their guards down for a second, give the guest an opportunity to kind of expound himself, what he means by that, what his premise is, see whatever he's presenting, and then make a decision or conclusion, right? So.
Sure. Brother, I listen, I really commend you, just to be very straightforward, being of Hebrew Israelite faith and being so open-minded and and um, and willing to stretch, every bit of belief and or even knowledge to really get to truths. Listen, because I'm going to be honest with you. I did not know you were going to reference so much anthropology. If I did, I would have brought some, you know what I'm saying, some receipts as well. You feel me? I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't know. So, but I'm talking about, I'm very, very impressed, and I respect it greatly.
And
Um,
vice versa, vice versa. I knew you was gonna be astute, but I didn't know you was gonna be this astute, because you know how to rebound off questions and give follow up. So you've been here before, I could tell. So
it went exactly how I thought it was going to go. We talking about a scholarly and respectful debate. I love it. You feel me? As far as I'm concerned, brother, I rocks with you, and I appreciate the audience for showing up and giving feedback as well. I,
yeah,
I think what we're going to come from this is like I say, a greater understanding, because again, just what I'm thinking here is, and what I'm willing to learn on is this, and I'm not going to hold you because I know you got to go. I believe, and I'm just going to say that like that. I believe, and until we really get down to the bottom of it, that even when it comes to Hebrew Israelite spirituality, that it has been just overshadowed, stripping, stolen, plagiarized, and all of the above, and there's a reason why. Because there's a power in it. You feel me? There's a power, a great power in it. And so again, it's like I am not a basher of religions. I'm not that type. As far as I'm concerned, I mean every indigenous religion across the world is all ours. I'll take from every single one of them. You see what I'm saying? I'll take for all our stuff. So long story short, brother, once again, it was a pleasure and an honor. You feel me? And I look forward to the next discussion.
I do as well. I know sometimes random people will click on this live looking for some kind of bloodlust and some kind of yelling and screaming and cursing and you this and you that, you know what I'm saying? But you know, for brothers and sisters that are on a higher plane of understanding, like that's your lower self talking, right? That's because the frustration being who we are and identifying how we do in this particular country, where the blood of our ancestors has been spilled here. We've been never given a means of revoking the damage that we've received, epigenetically, and that has caused us to be at odds with one another. Like, this is the tool of the oppressor that we have those type of conversations, yelling, screaming, arguing, debating, because he doesn't have to do anything, right? But if we do this and share knowledge and we build and we grow, and then we have our own systems. Oh, you have this program, or you have that system, you have this institute. Now that's what they hate. So they got to send more of these angry Negroes in here to stir up the pot to get us upset. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times I may promote it like that, but then when they come in for the conversation, this is stillness. This is calm. This is, wow, I've never really been at ease talking about a subject like this. You know, we want to change the atmosphere so that those can receive the knowledge, understand it from both perspectives, and make their own decision. At the end of the day, we have to build systems, institutes, technology that's going to benefit us. If we're not the beneficiary of these systems that we create of our own selves, then we're always going to get the haphazard results from what is offered to us by our oppressors. And we can never have a revolution, or we can never have a change at the core foundation if we continue to rely upon their systems to not only educate us, not only teach us, but also sustain us and anger us. We got to move that aside, have these type of bills, and then after this is done, I say, hey, brother, what you got going on? It's like I told the brother, yo, I bought your book. Of course I bought your book. Hey, group economics, social economics is the first way for me to build a bridge for conversation. If somebody told me they have work out there, they have a product out there, whatever, before I have a conversation with you, if I want to respect and honor you enough to have that dialogue, I'm going to support you. That's the only way you know somebody's not coming to debate you, because they pay money. they use their dollar. They bought something. Say, okay, I brought this. I want to make sure I'm coming to the table to understand, because they look to understand. I'm not looking to argue. I said, look, let me read this, get an idea where this brother's at, and then give him an opportunity to expound. So that way I have everything I need to have these type of fruitful conversations. So brother, you're welcome here anytime. I look forward to talk to you again. I appreciate it. So is there any way that anybody can contact you outside of here if they want to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. Just
how they can get your book as well.
If you look up my Facebook page, Andre Amaru Dey, I think it's Andre Amaru Dey II. Andre Maurice Amaru Dey II. Actually, I know that's long, family. Yeah, can I put, is it the chat? I can put it in. So, you know what?
Yeah, you can drop it in chat. You can drop it in chat.
Yeah, I can join the chat. But no, mine's asking me to go through too much. It's all good. But
what I'll do, Andre, send it to me on Facebook, and I'm gonna add it in the description of this video. They can just go in there, click it, and they can follow you. Does that work?
I'll do this. I'll send all my contacts and also the website to our book as well, brother. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And look, family, you know, we have tons of books in our repository on Patreon. This will just be one of many we add to it. And again, being exposed to the knowledge, right? And knowing it in advance and have some kind of grounding in it will allow you to be patient enough to hear somebody's unique perspective on it. Now, you may have heard it before, like me. I've heard this argument before, but I never heard it from this brother. And the way that he projects it with the core and the way that he is level-headed in sharing it, you can tell he's a master teacher, because we don't really have a lot of those nowadays. That generation is dying. However, we picking up the mantle. We have to continue this moving on. Now, I don't know how old you are, my brother. You don't have to tell your age. I'm 42 years old. I'm an old man. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I'm 2 years behind you, brother. We're getting up there.
Okay, you 40.
40, yeah.
All right, young brother. Yeah. So, but we're the next elders, right? And if the youth don't have this to look up to, then we're doomed.
Absolutely.
Right? Because they can't get it nowhere else, brother. So,
you
all right, brother.
You said one thing. I just want to.
Okay, you got it.
Get you on before we go.
Mm-hmm.
Building institutions and practically building our own everything. I say this all the time. Jurisdiction, institutions, and infrastructure. That's what we have to be on. That's what we have to be on, family. And you made a post about, I think it was status correction.
Yeah.
So we have a Aboriginal government as well.
Okay. Are you connected to my brother Ali Muhammad?
Namataga Ali?
Yes.
Started with him.
Okay. Yeah. That's my brother. I haven't spoken to him in a while, like maybe 2 years. But if you go and type in videos with me, there's tons of videos with me and him. I don't know if you see them already, but there's tons of videos of me and him.
I have it, brother. I have it.
Yeah, it's all over YouTube. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
But yeah, bro. Yeah, so we got a lot to mesh on and communicate about me. This was a great scratching of the surface. But
Yeah. So once we get this portion over with, then we can talk about building. All right, brother. What you got going on? What we got going on? How we can work together? And it's crazy because tomorrow there is a unity gathering where I'm at, where we have this synagogue. Black Jews are inviting us out. People that I've known for some time and other people in the community, despite their affiliations religiously or culturally, to come out and have this unity group so that we can have these powwows and discussions and share economic information and details, talk about infrastructures that we have established. And that's how we move forward. So I've been about this for at least 14 years. And it's always good to meet another brother in arms to say, hey, we could do it together. So these conversations are good. They're interesting. But the real meat and potatoes is, all right, now that that's done, what are we building? what we got? You know what I'm saying?
What we building. Yeah,
That's it. That's it. All right, brother. So I appreciate your time, Andre, man. You're welcome here anytime. We'll talk about when we're going to get you back on the show for our part 2. And then our part 3 is going to be about building, right? That'll be our 3-part series we'll do. And then if you have any platforms you'd like me to come on to patronize or to send anybody who follows this channel, go patronize, let me know on Facebook to send me a message. I'll make sure we send them your way. The first thing we're going to do is patronize your book. And then after that, if you have anything else going on that may be beneficial to anybody that is watching, I want to make sure I share it with you. You know what I'm saying? So that's how you know we're not enemies, because I'm sending people your way. So I'll go support this brother. You know what I'm saying? So
it's going to be reciprocated, brother. As far as I'm concerned, man, you made an acquainted brother in me. You see what I mean? So man, just look forward to the exact same thing from my perspective, man. Like I feel like people need to know who you are. More people need to know who you are, so they can benefit from what you have to offer. There's a lot, man. So yeah.
All right, my brother. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day. Namaste. I don't know what you're saying. Your greeting, peace. Hold that. Yeah, peace. Peace and love. All right, my brother. So peace and love, and I'll see you next time. Okay, my brother. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Likewise, brother.
All right. All right. Excellent discussion. Appreciate it, brother, for coming on. What I'm gonna say to y'all is we're gonna talk about the next discussion. This discussion was like 2 weeks in the making, because I had a lot of personal things I was doing on the weekend that I wasn't able. Like I was out of town on Fridays. I wasn't able to coordinate this, but I'm glad we did. That was just an introduction or preliminary. To the next time we talk, I will have the Enlil deck. And that will also be available on the Patreon if you're interested. I saw that we had 2 donations today. So out of one of the 2 people that donated, I am going to put your names in a hat. And then I will announce who the winner is next time that we're live to win the Cultural Background Study Bible. In here, if you go into the book of Genesis in here, it does take a look at other ancient Near Eastern epics and myths. Like we mentioned, Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh and Enuma Elish. We have the Seuzra. We have who else? We have Utnapishtim epic. All as mentioned in here alongside the Bible, so you can get to see the comparisons, the contrast, and things of that nature. So if you just have this as a foundation, then you're already familiar with what we're saying here. Also, I have this old book that I pull out sometimes by Dr. David E. Graves. It's called The Archaeology of the Old Testament. In here, he actually references all of those epics that we were just talking about. Let me see. Yeah. So we have Atrahasis in here, that he mentions Atrahasis in here, and then he gives from tablet 3 of Atrahasis here. He also mentions the Epic of Gilgamesh that we'll see here. He also mentions the Enuma Elish that's in here as well. And he goes all the way into the genealogies, and he goes into the Sumerian kings list. Right. So it's a quick resource. In that slide deck that I have a bunch of sources in that slide deck. It's available on the Patreon. Sign up for the Patreon, www.patreon.com/Divine Prospect. Get access to that slide that I just did. I ran through it really fast. I can't even use it now, but I have the Lim one. You know, we always ready. You know what I'm saying? So I got the Lim one on deck. I got the Anunnaki one on deck. Whatever you want, I got it on deck. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna bring out the Enlil one. We're gonna go into the Enlil one, very similar to the one that we did with the ENKI one, and we'll go into the information, and we'll have a great conversation, right? Also, we use. I mean, he mentioned this earlier in regards to Akhenaten and Atenism, what scholars call Atenism or Aten. Some people say that this is the origins of monotheism. I disagree, and I think most scholars disagree as well. This is henotheism, right? In which Akhenaten singled out Aten because Aten was a deity that was not tied to the Amurah priesthood at the time. And the Amurah priests were gained too much power, too much control, and Akhenaten wanted to create a manor, which is a city away from the typical cities that the pharaohs were reigned from, and be able to give a lot of the wealth and prosperity that was being held up by the priesthood and release it out to the common folk. But Atenism is not monotheism, right? And our position is that the Israelites, the pre-Israelites, did not keep what we call henotheism. Monotheism. I say henotheism. Henotheism was the order of the day. That is the pre-exilic model. And that is what they kept all the way until we get to the post-exilic period, where things started to shift and change because of the nature of the circumstances that they were in at the time, right? So you have the developments of proto-monotheism that start to develop in the post-exilic period in the Persian rule. And then it gets fostered more and more and more and more as you get later on in history, right? So those are things I'll bring out for him as well, because knowing that is very important, because that way he doesn't skewer what our position is, right? And gets to know it from our genuine standpoint. So again, any of these resources, when you sign up for the Patreon, there are hundreds of books and articles there about everything we talked about in detail, right? So you can equip yourself, you can edify yourself, and give you something to do on the weekends and after work if you have the time, right? You want to read, you want to watch videos. I have my academic blogs on there. I have content that's not on this channel. The PowerPoint is on there. I have PowerPoints on there. Whatever you're looking for is going to be on there. And our classes, I will send the pre-recorded session on Tuesday. We're going to pick up on our classes this upcoming Tuesday. And it better helps you understand the scriptures in a way where when you hear this information, you're not shocked, right? You're not dismayed, right? You're not deterred, because you understand it within its ancient Near Eastern context. And when you understand it that way, you get to really see how Yah's working through all civilizations. But when you isolate and separate it from every other civilization, then you're doing a disservice to the author's immediate audience, because that's what their familiarity would be with. Right. And when we read the opening of Genesis 1, we see that it is a stark polemic or apologetic against the Neo-Babylonian epics and myths of the day. Right. So a lot of the correlations will be seen not in Atrahasis, but more so in the Enuma Elish, because Marduk, who was the patron deity and the Bel of that region, or the Lord of that region, you will see more similarities between him and YHWH, right? The difference is YHWH is not mentioned to come from a pantheon of deities. There's no polytheism in the text or any of that there, right? So you'll see that because it's written in direct, stark against that. That's why you get Tehemoth. I told you about that. You have Tehom and Tehemoth. And Tehemoth is an actual sea dragon monster that is likened unto Tiamat. And the Leviathan is a very similar monster that causes chaos in the sea that is very similar to Tiamat, and the dragons that Tiamat have crafted and created to go to war with the younger gods in the Enuma Elish epic, right? You start to see these correlations. You'll see in Psalm 74 where YHWH is going to war with Leviathan. You'll see in the book of Job where the behemoth and the Leviathan are mentioned there. These are ancient monsters. Again, you'll see this in the Enuma Elish. And then you see a patron deity going to war to destroy them, as you see in Isaiah chapter 27 and Psalm chapter 74. So that's where you get to see more of these clashing motifs between the serpent entity, whether it's a sea dragon serpent, and the patron deity. But at the same time, there are so many nuances that they're two totally different stories. And because they simply share some cognates is a result of all them all coming from a similar background where the people come. So when you get deeper into it and you take a look at these things, you'll see by the time you get to these later deities, such as the Anunnaki become subordinate to Marduk because they were afraid to kill Tiamat. And they had to help Marduk kill Tiamat for them. And guess what? They became his subordinates. They had to build him a palace and all of that. But when we get into that in our conversations, I'll flesh that out and I'll show you. And again, I'll create that profile. Again, create 2 domains, put arrows this way, arrow this way, have the variables of X, and link up every variable so that you can unpack what these 2 identities are to see if they are mutually congruent or they are diametrically opposed. And the last thing I want to say is the reason why we know that YHWH, this before we close, that we know YHWH is not ENKI or Enlil is because he talks judgment against Babylon. Now, ENKI and Enlil will never say judgment to Babylon, as we have in Yirmiyahu or Yirmiyahu 50 or Jeremiah 50 or Ezekiel chapter 21 or in Isaiah chapter 40. When you see these passages condemning Babylon and the gods of Babylon, why would ENKI and Enlil condemn themselves, number 1, or number 2, tell their followers to condemn them? If that happens, their temples will close down. They won't get no oblations, no drink offerings, no food offerings. They will not service the gods. Those gods cannot live without being serviced. Let's read this real quick and close out. Let's read. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 21. And if I went through my PowerPoint slowly, we go through all of these ritualistic practices that we see in here. Yep. All right. Sorry about that. Just lost my connection to my AirPods. They died, but my mic should be here. But hopefully y'all can still hear me. All right. So we'll see in these scriptures as I close out that YHWH is condemning Babylon. Condemning Babylon. Let's take a look at it. Right? Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 21. And we're going to see that their practices of divination, claromancy are in vain. And then in Jeremiah 50, a whole chapter of YHWH condemning Babylon. How? Babylon is keeping the Anunnaki alive. But yet he condemns them. Let's take a look real quick. We'll close out. Ezekiel chapter 21, verse 18. The sword of Yah came to me again. As for you, son of man, mark 2 ways for the sword of the king of Babylon to come. Both of them shall come from the same land, and make a signpost. Make it at the head of the way to a city. Mark a way for the sword to come to Rabbah of the Ammonites, and to Judah, into Jerusalem the fortified. For the king of Babylon stands at the parting of the way, at the head of the 2 ways, to use divination. This is showing that Yah is against the divination of the king of Babylon. The king of Babylon is a custodian of these ancient Sumerian myths and epics and deities. He shakes the arrows. He consults the teraphim. He looks at the liver. I'm going to do a post on that too. You're going to see a post on what that liver divination is, right? You never see any of the ritualistic practices or cultic objects from YHWH that has anything to do with liver divination. And to his right hand comes the divination of Jerusalem, to set in battle rams, to open the mouth with murder, to lift up the voice with shouting, to set the battle rams against the gates, to cast up mounds, to build siege towers. But to them, it will seem like a false divination. They have sworn solemn oaths, but he brings their guilt to remember that they may be taken. Jeremiah chapter 50. We're going to wrap it up. Jeremiah chapter 50. The word of Yah spoke concerning Babylon, concerning the land of the what? Chaldeans. The Babylonian kings of Nebuchadnezzar was not around during the time of the Chaldeans. There was no Chaldeans at that time. That is an anachronistic. That means you're mentioning a phrase in the current time to refer to something in the past that was not named that. By Jeremiah the prophet, declare among the nations and declare, set up a banner, proclaim, conceal it, not take it. Babylon is taken. Bel is put to shame. Merodach is dismayed. Her images are put to shame. Her idols are dismayed. The gods live through images. They live through icons. They live through statues. They live through votive offerings. The gods cannot survive without that because their essence is splintered into these areas. It's called the Splinter Divine. That book is on Patreon if you want to read it. So the deities, every object, cultic object, houses an essence of the deity. Why would YHWH, who is in Lil, talk about judgment against Babylon, the last custodian of his cultic worship, objects, and temples? There's no way that YHWH can be that, because he's condemning himself. For out of the north a nation shall come up against her, which shall make her land a desolation, and none shall dwell in it. Both man and beast shall flee. This is judgment and destruction that's coming upon Babylon. So we have plenty of this throughout the text. Plenty of it. And Yahweh also tells the Israelites, do not bow down to the sun, moon, and star that you see above. If there's constellations and astrological signs that represent their deities, then YHWH is telling them not to look up and worship. Therefore, you are retreating away from the ritual practices that's necessary for the sustenance of Enlil and ENKI. Why would ENKI, if that's YHWH, or Enlil, that's YHWH, why would they be carrying on about this way? That makes absolutely no sense. So anyway, family, thank you for watching. I want to keep going on. I got to go. I love you. I appreciate you for watching. If you can, feel free to donate. Sign up for the Patreon. If there's anything that we can do to serve you, email us at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com. We will gladly serve you. If you don't have a calendar, get you a calendar as well. You'll see it in the description below. Sign up for the Patreon so you can get into these classes, and we can go in depth into the scripture so you can see the things that are masked from on the surface, so that when you get deep into the text to see what it's actually saying, when you come across this stuff, it won't shake you. It'll be flat-footed and anchored into Yah and into the culture that he has surrounded us with. So I thank you, Yah, for giving us the opportunity to have this great discussion with that great brother Amaru Dey. Good brother, well-spoken, temperate. Look forward to having a conversation with him again. But at the end of the day, as we saw on the slide, I just want to show you this. I'm going to show you this on the slide. All right? Because some of y'all probably didn't see it yet. But when you go back and you watch this, you can go and see it. All right? Your right hand, YHWH, glorious in power. Your right hand, YHWH, shatters the enemy. YHWH goes forth like a mighty one. He stirs up his zeal like a warrior. He shouts. Yes, he roars in triumph over his enemies. Surely God will crush the heads of his enemies, the hairy crowns of those who persist in guilty ways. And we see right there, ENKI and Lil, whoever you want to name it, in YHWH. I'm not saying that's him, but that is a graphical depiction, so that you can see that Yah always comes out on top. All praise to the Most High. Love you, family. Thank you for watching. See you in the next live stream. All right. Thank you for all those that were there. I didn't get to shout out everybody, but love you, family. See you in the next live stream. Peace and shalom. Shalom.